Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to this panel, The Art of the Pivot. So this is going to be very conversational. I have three awesome individuals up here who have pivoted in their professional lives and probably also in their personal lives. And I'm actually in the midst of a pivot. And so I wanted some insight, so I pitched this panel, and here we are. My name is Patrice Peck. I am class of 2009. I'm a journalist, and I have been for over 10 years. And I'm currently making a slight pivot into art. So performing art, covering art more so, exploring the topics I did in my journalism, but with a new vehicle. And I'm 36, and it's quite overwhelming and a bit intimidating and terrifying to pivot at that age, I think, especially when, unfortunately, I've associated a lot of my self-value and worth to my career. And so we're going to be talking about all that kind of stuff. But I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves. So let's start with Clay.
Hello, everybody. Is this good? You good? All right. I'm Clay Williams, class of '99. Got a contingent over here. And I spent a dozen years working in corporate IT, in media, for magazine companies and that sort of thing. 13 years ago, this summer, I took the opportunity. The company was moving my job out of state, and so I took the opportunity to become a full-time photographer. I've been doing photography and a little bit of writing for several years before that. It was just the opportunity to take a leap. They gave us about a year's notice about when the move was happening, so I just took that time to run with it.
Also, do you want to just say real quick, what kind of photography you do now?
I mostly focus on food and drink. I photograph some of the recent things I do. I photographed a story that's was in the Times food section last week. I wrote and photographed a story in Food and Wine last month. I photographed culinary tours. I photographed 2 tours to Italy last year. I'm going to Cape Town this month. And I have shot now 5 cookbooks with a couple more in the works. So.
And you have a what's the James Beard? I'm sorry, I gotta plug you. Come on.
Yes, I also won a James Beard Award.
Period.
For a story that I pitched and photographed with a writer named Kayla Stewart, who's brilliant. We did a story about sugarcane farmers in South Louisiana.
Awesome. Okay. Michael?
Shouldn't have let him go first. Hi, Michael Chernicoff, class of 2009.
Better.
We'll get one more time. Audio's good, everybody? Okay. So I have, since graduating Amherst, worked in technical support, gone to 2 different graduate schools, been an adjunct professor, a school teacher in 3 different school districts, a full-time stay-at-home dad, and for the past 3.5 years, I've been doing software development for federal R&D contracts. So I know a thing or two about completely derailing my career prospects.
I know that's right. Okay. Anything else you would like to add?
Stuff we're going to talk about when we get there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Get to the things that...
Ooh, good question. Where are you from?
Harrisburg, Pennsylvania originally, but I call Rockville, Maryland home right now.
Nice.
Brooklyn, New York.
Okay, and MJ.
Hi. I'm Merle Smith, or MJ. I've been in finance for 15 years, but my pivot within finance included being a professional intern for 2 years, a branch teller, a commercial banking portfolio manager, an investment banker, a sales and trading trader, and then finally a buy-side investment director and principal and an investment committee member. So unfortunately, I didn't have quite the. I've had plenty of career derailments and changes, but all within the wonderful realm of finance. And I'm from New London, Connecticut.
What class are you?
2009. There we go.
Okay.
And very excited to be here.
Yes. Okay, so can you each talk about the moment you realized you wanted to pivot and like when that was, like how old were you, sort of what was the state of your like professional and maybe your personal life, if you want to throw that in. We can start with MJ.
Sure. The day I wanted to pivot was the first day I started working. 2009 for everybody was pretty much, dreams deferred, as a year and as a population. What job I had was with Royal Bank of Scotland, who I had interned with for 3 years and promptly blew up as an institution. And they told me through about 1 month before graduation that my position no longer existed. And so, I was panicked and upset and, just didn't know what to do and went home and found like the local branch and was just like, look, like I'll work for free. I just want to like be able to put this on my resume. Like, do you have paperwork like in the back like I can do? And that's what I did. I just worked for free for like 3 months and they were like, you're really good at paperwork. You should, how about $10 an hour? And that went on for a year and a half of being in the back office, $10 an hour. And then they finally let me be a branch teller. And so every day of that, it was just like, I need to get the heck out of here. And it was literally just evaluating my resources and my own commitment. Because like, it's one thing to be like, okay, this isn't for me, but it's another thing to visualize the practical steps you need to take to, move on. And in particular, you were dealing with, I think, a generational shift in people and how people viewed work. I think everyone was shaken to their core in terms of what did the economy mean? What did our individual places mean in the workforce? Because everyone was touched at some level in terms of that disruption. And I think while it was scary, there was, I think, fundamental opportunities that I noticed that I realized was just completely escaping people's awareness. And so a lot of times when I was talking to other people that were in the industry, like investment bankers or other people, as a branch teller, they were completely dismissive in terms of my skill set, in terms of what I knew, because there was an old world thinking of you can only learn this skill set if you take certain steps. And frankly, the internet completely got rid of those guardrails. That barrier of entry did not exist. You could learn how to model. You could learn how to think about things legally, and you could learn the literal process and steps that a person took. So all it took at a certain point was you just finding that crevice, and that's where I really focused my time and energy of just making sure that I had all those bases covered and that my differentiation was in execution and just pure outright commitment. And so that's a long answer.
What crevice are you talking about?
One thing I would say is that when I was coming into finance, Dodd-Frank was a huge change in terms of just banks were forced to think about how do I just not make as much money as possible, but how do I not lose all the money that I have a fiduciary responsibility for? And that fundamental change in terms of risk culture was something that was different for everyone because nobody wanted to think about risk. If you wanted to be an investment banker, you wanted to think about how much money you can make and like the good times rolling and all that stuff. But nobody wanted to think about what if bankruptcy happened? What if what are the fundamental things that could mean that I'm wrong? And so when I started realizing that there was this whole space where like nobody wanted to do this stuff, but it had to be done. It was regulatory controlled. I became focused on like how can I become differentiated in taking the lead on all these other activities that have been part of finance banking, but also still utilizing this fundamental skill set around risk and implementing that on every opportunity I could find. Because there would be investment banking opportunities that I would say, hey, how is your risk culture? How do you guys think about that? Where are the roles that are focused on that? And they're like, oh, well, actually, this just opened up. And so maybe we don't have a whole role here, but we have something in adjacent.
Gotcha.
And I kept applying that same strategy step by step, brick by brick, and accumulating more skills that I could show show that personal growth, personal momentum. And I was always upfront of what my end goal was. I don't want to be here. This isn't like the end goal for me. But you have an issue. You have a gap in terms of your core competency, your needs. I can fill that because I've done this, and I'm the only person that's willing to do it. That wants to be here at this moment to solve this problem. And once I realized that execution and competency far outweighed, the just checking all the boxes at a certain point, things started to really open up for me because I could focus myself on how to be, effective in the workplace. So,
okay, Michael.
So there have been two main pivot points in my life, actually. One was when I went from working and pushing hard to be an academic and a research scientist to being a teacher, which was my last year of my first grad school, when my advisor brought me into his office and was like, so this semester you've been mentoring all the incoming grad students on how to be better teachers. You've been doing research on how to reduce gender equity gaps in our like introductory courses. You've been doing, your students all love you. That's great. You've done no work for your doctoral thesis for the entire semester. Just like actual productive work. Because you're clearly like, not because you're bad at it, but because clearly you're spending all your time doing the teaching stuff. Have you thought about just doing teaching and like not taking this career path, which I had taken because I want to be a professor? And what do professors do? They teach, and that's what I'm smart. I can teach. And just the moment of, but it's a lot of grant writing, a lot of research, a lot of doing a lot of things. It's multiple I was in physics, so we're talking multiple postdocs before you'll even like, either they'll let you have a classroom or you just adjunct and you just make a pittance doing, work that goes away the next semester. So I'm like, I actually just want to be a teacher anyway. Go be a teacher. I got a federal fellowship to pay for ed school. I taught for a few years in various urban schools to pay off the fellowship, so I came out debt-free at the end. I had a great time doing it. It was fulfilling work. And then, I'm going to be honest, my oldest child was born. Right over there. Julia, wave for everybody. Hi. And she, and I had already made some changes. I had switched school districts to be closer to home before she was born. I had, tried to change things around to be as accommodating as I could, but it was, my partner has a clergy job, so she's not available like a lot of the time. And it was just a matter of I want to be able to spend time with my kid and any future children, which I ended up having. I want the flexibility to be able to call into work and say, hey, my kid's sick, I can't come in at the last minute. Or, hey, it's her, ophthalmologist appointment, I'm going to take off and be back in an hour, and nobody is upset at you about it. And we have a severe problem with underpaying teachers in this country, and that's a real problem. But I, at some point, have to make the selfish choice and say, I love teaching, but on the other hand, kids are expensive, and there's more money to be made in software, unfortunately. I work a lot less hard in software than when I did as a public school teacher, I'll say that, but I also get paid twice as much. So, if someone wants to fix that, I'll go back to teaching. So I think it was those two moments where when I just, in two different directions, shifted my career.
Did you feel a bit guilty shifting to software?
I'm gonna say no.
Like,
it does, and I do. And like, if I won the lottery, I would go back. Like, I'd be a substitute teacher tomorrow. Like, no question. I'd go right back to it. I'd love it, and it does a lot of good in the world. I did make sure, at least, that So I work doing. I work in a non-for-profit that runs federal R&D centers. So I'm doing government work. It's civilian agencies, not like defense, anything like that. I'm keeping airplanes safe. I'm keeping software from being hacked. I'm making sure that like grants are audited correctly, things like that. I'm doing COVID things at one point when everyone was doing COVID things because there was money there. And so I'm trying at least to like use my skills to do things that I feel like are a net good. On the other hand, yeah, there is some guilt probably, but I think you have to prioritize your things in life, and there is unfortunately no perfect job that lets you like be the most morally upstanding person you can be and do what you love and make enough money and spend time with your family and enjoy what you do. And there wasn't a way to do all of those things, and I picked the things that made the most sense for my life.
Yeah. Clay, tell us about a significant pivot, like when and where.
I really just made the one.
Yeah.
I was, like I said, I had been working in IT for about 12 years, and I worked for a company, a media company that was based in Connecticut, and they were moving my job out of state. I got into IT because I really loved like the computer side of things and the management and working with the people, and it was in magazine publishing mostly, and so like being on that schedule and being a part of all of that, the job sort of killed that in me. And you know, I sort of came up in the early 2000s or mid aughts was when blogs started becoming a bigger thing and more media companies were looking in that direction, and there was hyper local content and like all of that. And so I missed the one thing that IT job didn't give me from the beginning was opportunities to write and communicate and do things like that. And so I started blogging. I started covering the sort of food explosion around Brooklyn. I photographed like butchering classes. I photographed the openings of restaurants or whatever, and I'd get hired to do those things. And it was a side gig. It was a thing to sort of give me a creative outlet. And for years, people had been saying, "Oh, you should try to do that professionally." And I was like, everyone always says that. But given the opportunity of a 1-year lead time on when my job was moving out of state, I decided to go all in on it. And I had another year and a half where I was doing some part-time IT work to help like build the foundation, but that was it. I had been I liked writing, but photography was the thing that really felt like the mode of storytelling I really wanted to focus on. And so I just I started taking classes, and I just put my work out there as much as possible.
So you had the year lead time.
Yep.
So were you able to like support yourself that first year of being full-time photographer?
Barely. I'll say, my wife had a real job, and certainly knowing that at least half of the bills were covered made it a lot easier to be able to do anything. I'll also say not having kids is definitely one of the reasons I was able to take a leap, because we only had 2 mouths to feed. But yeah, I did take on some freelance work in IT for. I was really just on one project for about 18 months, and it was like a part-time, like a couple days a week sort of thing. But this was at a company where I had worked previously. All the people I had worked with were good friends of mine, still are, and they understood what I was doing. So they brought me in for the project to help them, but they understood that I was building like a foundation for a new career. And so, if I need to take off for an afternoon to go and or take a longer lunch so I can go and photograph a food cart or like some event or anything, they were totally fine with it, and that helped as well.
Did you have a photography background when you started this?
Sort of. I did black and white darkroom photography all through high school. I was just telling some folks earlier that I didn't do photography in college because it was one of those things where you have to take Art 11 if you wanted to use the dark room, if you wanted to take any photo classes, anything. And it's like, I've done this for 4 years. I don't want to do that. I mean, in hindsight, I kind of wish I had some art foundations now, but I ended up sort of learning by doing, and other classes that I've taken since then. And the actual photography, it's just, it's more of an act of continuing to shoot and get better and look at work and all of that. So that's been a process.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Michael, what would you say was the most, if you were to tell people something about your main pivot, so let us know what that main pivot is since you had several, what's the most surprising thing you would tell them?
So I'd say it's the pivot away from education entirely into doing the software work I do now, which I did end up taking over a year just being a stay-at-home dad in between the two, part of which was trouble finding a job, part of which was 2020. So honestly, being stay-at-home dad was good because we didn't have to worry about daycare closing. I was a daycare. There you go. Problem solved. Don't go outside anyway. Yeah. And there were hiring freezes, so it didn't matter. But I would say that the biggest thing about that is do not underestimate what your intelligence and your ability to learn things, especially coming from, a lot of Amherst people here, obviously, liberal arts education, quality education. I gave my final day-long interview at the job I landed. Part of it was you had to give a talk about a previous project you had done. And this was for a computer, programming job. I wasn't a CS major. I took one computer science class in college, and it was scientific computing taught by a physics professor half the time. I don't know anything about algorithms or data structures or whatever, and they want me to do this in the job. So I'm like, well, I can give you a job talk about here's a mid-semester presentation I did on my PhD research, because I ended up doing a lot of computational work. That's how I know how to program computers, so I can talk about the numerical algorithms I used and for this biophysics thing. And I'm talking about the stuff, and I'm like, I know the actual computer science here is pretty baseline. It's just writing some simple stuff. Anyone could do this. And I'm thinking they're going to look at me and go, yeah, this guy doesn't know anything about computers, obviously, which I know. And at the end, everyone was like, wow, you're a really smart person because you understand all this stuff about the science of it and the math, and we only know about computers, but you know all these other things. And that's, don't underestimate coming into a job and being like, I'm a smart person. I know things, and I can learn more things, and I'll just impress you with what I know, and then you'll hire me to learn more things later. Don't, it's like you were saying, the boxes on the resume or you go to your LinkedIn page, you need to know this, this, and this. You probably need some of that stuff to get by the now AI, resume parser they use. But beyond that, if you haven't actually done those things, but you can convince someone you can completely change your career to something different. Never mind what your resume says. Never mind what your degree on your wall says.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of that, I mean, so part of these statistics I'll give you just from deals I've done, but 30% of all job descriptions are wrong that are posted out there. They're just outright wrong, are not related to the job, wasn't approved by the hiring manager, just somebody just put something on there and and it's just rocking out there. Nobody's checking it, and you're applying for it, and you have no idea what you're applying for, and they don't know what they're looking at. You do not, if you want to truly pivot, you cannot ask for permission. You cannot wait for someone to say, yes, you're perfect and you haven't done any of this before, but you're the chosen one. You get to go, not them, you. That doesn't exist. It comes down to challenging the role, challenging the hiring manager, making them tell you, what is it that I do that doesn't fit this role? Because in the majority of circumstances, many of the people that are telling you no don't really have the correlation between what your foundational skill set is and what even the role that they're looking for. And once you actually start creating those concentric circles for them and diagramming specifically what the needs are to what you've done previously and really guiding them through that, you start to be able to craft your own roles. And look, this wasn't something that could be done 20 years ago. I think people have to realize work culture shifted in terms of 2000, people were just figuring out what the internet was as just a concept. But in 2008 and 2009, workplaces started to realize how to use the internet and use technology to create efficiencies. But with all of that activity that was so focused on cutting costs and getting to the most efficient solution, foundational knowledge was lost. Institutional knowledge was just essentially waste bin because it didn't fit a specific process. So you have whole generation of people in banking, in medical school, I mean, you name the industry, it doesn't matter, that do not know 70% of what the previous generation knew in terms of just total knowledge. Even though through advancements and things like that, there's been a focus on getting to the documented right answer and process without actually ever questioning what the process is and what are you trying to actually achieve. And so in a lot of ways, pivoting is looking around you and figuring out where can I actually make a difference? And where can I not only pivot for myself, but how can I pivot this organization? You know, because you have to realize you are the change maker. You are the solution, not just for your own life, but for this organization. You matter. Like you're smart, you're capable, and more importantly, most places are messed up. I don't care where you work. I don't care how great trust me. I've been across the table from Goldman Sachs and these guys, and they've been outright like, I don't know what's going on. Like, yeah, it's crazy. And it's like, you guys are supposed to be the smartest ones in the room. And they, the truth is we're all as a generation winging it at this point. 2020 proved that. Yeah. I mean, so I think you have to let go of this feeling that you're not adequate enough. The mere fact that you're here at this moment, you're adequate. We're in trouble as a society. We need everybody to step up and have that conviction to do what they want, what they feel passionate about. To save these.
I love these panelists. Okay. Clay, can you talk about how you got yourself set up? So, like when you were going to these, when you were doing your first projects in terms of going out and shooting and interviewing and writing, how did you set it up so that people gave you the chance to do these things? Because did you know them? Did you have connections? You know what I'm saying? And how did you present yourself?
So I sort of got into the community, the larger sort of food and local coverage community by just going places and writing about it or posting about it. This was 05, 06, 07, and I just started my own blog, which was easy even then. Yeah. And I was a 20-something in Brooklyn. There was always something happening. And so I would just go and shoot and post about it and share stuff on the sites like Flickr. It wasn't with the intent of getting work out of it, but then editors or whoever were always looking for new things to post about. We're always looking for stuff that they could use for free because they weren't paying anybody even then. and I had a job, and so it wasn't really for money. It wasn't even at the time for career. It was just, I wanted to put myself out there. And so, after years of doing that, like, I met some people at various publications and was able to sort of eventually parlay that into like a regular beat. There was a website that covered food in Midtown, and when the person who ran that moved to LA, actually. He runs Smorgasburg now.
Oh,
Actually.
Smorgasburg.
He needed some folks to take over, and I was one of the first crew to come in and do it. And so I was literally like writing and shooting this little stories about like the new like halal cart that showed up, or I was near Koreatown, so like whenever like a new restaurant over there would open up, I would I was posting something about that. And I mean, it paid, I think, literally like $30 a post. It was nothing, but like it was, one, it was practice, and two, it was building connections in the larger food community. And so I photographed a lot of other things. I wrote about other things. I was covering nightlife for a while. I was just like shooting like concerts and shows and parties and stuff like that. But the food was the thing that I kept coming back to. And just connecting in that community meant that, and I mean, I like to cook, I love to eat, it's a thing for me anyway, and so it was something I was just drawn to. And so I met a lot of people with food trucks around the time that food trucks were blowing up, right? I was, I'd get like a link from Eater or from one of the other sites, the Gothamist or something like that, because I was posting either on my own site or on the other site about whatever brand new thing was people were talking about in the moment. And over time, by the time 2011 came by and I was looking for work, like I already had sort of tear sheets, right? I already had like clips that I could show or that people have seen to know that I'm covering this sort of community. So, it was through connections like that how I ended up, shooting regularly for Zagat, like right after they got bought by Google. And they were doing regular restaurant coverage of like restaurant openings and like, roundups of like the best chicken dishes or like whatever it is, right? Like that was a real post, actually. And because of that, like I ended up, I mean, where I am now is based entirely on community. It's all the people that I've worked with, the people who know me, the people who've seen me working. The photo editor for a local Edible Brooklyn local food magazine, was a bit of a mentor to me. He picked up some photos. He hired me for a couple things, but he also connected me with the James Beard Foundation. And at the time, they were hosting something like 20 dinners a month with chefs from all over the country presenting dinners, and they had a volunteer system for the photography, and like I jumped on that because I got to eat the food, just the thing everyone has, but also it put me in the kitchen with some of the best chefs in the country, and it got me practice in doing that work and photographing the action and doing all the things I was really interested in doing. And most importantly, I met and gave my business card. I still use business cards. They've got like half my portfolio on them. And I handed them out to every chef that came in the kitchen. Every chef I worked with. The foundation was always going to give them the photos, but like I was like, I can email them to you, just let me know, or reach out. And so we would end up following each other on Instagram. We'd end up staying in touch. They would see me again the next time they were there. they would see me at like whatever other food events, and they got to know me, and I've become a familiar face. And now, you know, the chef I was telling you about, Shanari Freeman, who has like a restaurant in the Village in New York and in LA, doing vegan food. I met her. I first photographed her when she was still a culinary student, assisting, like as a volunteer, assisting a chef in the Beard House. And like, you know, she's been on the cover of magazines and like, you know, has like brand deals and stuff now. But like, you know, one of her first like profile pictures that she used of her and her whites was a picture I took of her, and she was so excited to have it, right? So like I'm able to be a constant a little bit in the community, and people see that, and that helps me grow into other areas.
I love that. Wait, really quick, what time is it?
It's about 3:40.
Okay, we're gonna have a bit of time at the end for Q&As, but I love that. So Clay, like a theme I see with you is just consistency and like connection building, community building,
Absolutely.
being humble, you know, not thinking you're too good to like volunteer, you know. Michael, I love how, you know, with that interview, you said, I might not have the skill sets like on paper, but I'm competent. I'm more than competent. I'm more than capable. And honestly, it also sounds like you have great like communication skills, because the way you were able to just talk about that presentation in the interview, it clearly like resonated with them. And then MJ, you know, kind of, like you said, piggybacking off of Michael and just really like honing in on your unique advantage, right, point, because we all have them, and just looking for those like areas, unique areas of like opportunities. So like I feel like all of these just really fit into one another really, really well. And also research. Research is big, like you said. Those are all things like I'm kind of doing at the moment. And so did all of you have like, you all had significant partners while you were doing these pivots, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
My wife was doing a pivot while I was doing a pivot.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Wow. Okay. So talk about that, what that was like. And how like, did she know you've been wanting to do a pivot? Or?
Oh yeah, no. So
Okay.
I got my wife her first job, and we worked at the same branch.
Yeah. Yeah.
We went to high school together. We were together. We knew we were gonna get married. You know, we were just very young, and so I was broke, and I got there first, and I was like, hey, like I think I can get you a job here, and so let's do this. And she was like, are you sure you want to work together? I was like, sure, and that was not a good idea. So she might have been pivoting like, you know, before I was even trying to pivot of just like, you know, trying to disengage. But yeah, I mean, look, the benefit of having like a community of disruptors at home where we're just both like scheming every day, like how are we gonna mess this up? like how are we gonna change the paradigm? And like it was incredible because she thinks of things completely different. Even though we were both in finance, her personality was always completely risk averse, like just by the book, like boom, boom, boom. And I was the complete opposite. I was just like, bring on the chaos. Like, let's just like, you know, let's mess things up. Let's be aggressive. And having two shining examples of people being able to be successful while taking diametrically opposed paths in the same field gave me better appreciation of what I was even capable of. Because every single thing that I would tell her of, you can't do this. This isn't how you do this. Like you're, you know, this is not the right way. Like you should just trust me. And then she'd go prove me wrong, and I'd just look like an idiot. And now I have like helpful data point, you know. But I mean, but it was eye opening time and time again. And even on simple things of not even just process, but like cultural things. Like my wife is African American, I'm African American, but like. She's dark skinned, I'm not. I would say things like, you can't wear your hair like that in a corporate setting. Like, you know, I remember that being one of the first things we talked about in 2010. And I was trained, you have to look a certain way to operate in corporate America. Point blank, end of discussion. And she said, you're an idiot. And ignored me. and wore her hair exactly the way she wanted to, and was promoted before me, even though I started a year before her.
Right.
So again, you talk about humbling, and like really just looking at yourself and being like, at a certain point, I don't know what I'm talking about. And like through either lived experience or just general, like, just accepting of the realities. And that's the biggest thing. Like at a certain point, you really have to be honest about what the situation is, what's going on around you, and who you are. Because, there comes to a certain point where you do have to ask yourself, what are you sacrificing? Like, what are you willing to give up? And maybe it's an insecurity. But maybe it's something material. Maybe it's family time. Maybe it's a sense of, reputation in the workplace. And for my wife and I, we both, I think, made the conscious choice of being like, we don't need to be exactly what corporate America wants us to be. We don't have to be the banker that like everybody else that's like in the view book. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like we carved our own lane, and I developed that courage by watching her. And 100%, like unquestionably.
Well, so what did y'all sacrifice?
For her and us, I think it was the ideal version of like being like, for me, I thought I was going to be Gordon Gekko.
Yeah.
And then, and I was like, well, yeah, that's not ever going to be like, that's just not who I am. That's not like, I'm not going to be ever that suave. I'm not, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because the importance is what can you develop as what can you develop in terms of your own conviction of your own skill set, but your own ability to like expand and push the box of what your field is. So many people spent time telling my wife like, look, this is your area, this is your scope of work, and she would say, but compliance covers everything. So why can't I do this?
Yeah.
Like, why can't I cover this? Yeah. Are you guys covering this? Have you thought about that? And but that comes with a cost of always being the person to push that box, of always being seen as the aggressor, but you can't give up. You can't, because if you give up, if you slide into that level of complacency, then you are sacrificing your advantage. And so you really have to, it's a sliding scale, one way or the other. There's a certain level of comfort that goes with being part of the system.
And does anyone have any questions? Yes.
So what I've learned so far is that to pivot, you need to have the willingness to take the risk and the wife to lead you through it. If you were single, do you have any advice for
Oh, wait, I'm so sorry. Do you mind taking this? Is this on? Thank you. I don't know if it's on.
No.
No. Oh, no.
Mic check.
There you go. Good job.
Thanks. So far what I've learned is that to pivot, you have to have the willingness to take the risk and a wife who leads you through it. So,
Period.
Absolutely.
how would you pivot if you were single? Would you be able to? And do you have any advice for people who are single on how to pivot?
Well, I'm single. Okay. I'm not married. I'm not married. And I'm in the midst of a pivot. Like I said, I've been a journalist for 10 plus years, and I'm pivoting partly into performance art, which is very different. However, it's partly because I'm still interested in exploring the topics and subject matter that I do in my journalism, but the industry has become very volatile. There's just like tons of layoffs. The industry is just different from when I entered in 2009, and I'm also just wasn't happy. I wasn't feeling fulfilled. But honestly, at first I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, what am I going to do? I was kind of in a similar position. But for me, experiencing this sort of existential crisis, I said, okay, I would ideally like to do something that makes me happy. So let me just do the things that I'm passionate about and that make me happy just for fun, and see and document that process, because I knew people would come to me with opportunities kind of similar to Clay if they saw what I was doing and what I was interested in. And because they know that I'm a competent, like capable, smart person, whether it's journalism or not, because I was sharing, going to all these different like art shows and galleries on my social media, I had people reach out to me saying, oh my gosh, I didn't know you're interested in art. Like, here's this opportunity, XYZ. And so I leaned a lot on like my social network and my friendships and my like professional networks. You don't always need like a romantic partner to look out for you. Like we were talking about Plan World, like those were all just, that's a social network, right? And that's your Amherst network, right? So I feel like you have a lot of value, whether you're like an Amherst alum or like know an Amherst alum. There's just so many other networks to sort of really take advantage of. And lean on your friends too, because I've been sharing a lot. I've been documenting this performance art journey and like with photos and videos and having friends come with me to sort of watch and give feedback. And then I share that journey in an email with like my success circle of like friends and family, and they give me feedback. So they're like along with the journey and they're giving me insight, and what I'm doing is top of mind. So they keep me in mind for like other opportunities. So just don't take for granted like your other sort of networks and relationships, I would say.
Yeah. I would also just say, like, finding a community is absolute necessity, but it can't be necessarily your catalyst. And so, like, if you haven't found your community yet, there needs to be, I would say, an existential crisis on your own part, because you have to look at what's the opportunity cost of me not doing this. Is it my happiness? Is it the professional? Whatever. But you have to find, like, what am I giving up by not pursuing that, and not necessarily what am I losing by if I do this. And so and that has to be kind of like the calculus that you have to like create, because that finding that community will only happen once you've taken that step, like once you've crossed the Rubicon and you've said, I'm going to do this. Then that community will find you. Then they will find you as you step out, because you're vulnerable. Yeah. You've put yourself in a position where people can find you, and where you're putting yourself out there to be part of that community and to learn more, and not as an authority or something like that. It's literally to be a member, to be a participant, and that's what's important.
Oh, isn't that question?
Vulnerability is like, I love that, because I feel so vulnerable and exposed, and it really shows you like what kind of friends you have. I'm so grateful, because all my friends, when I'm like, hey guys, I'm like getting into performance art now, which is like the weirdest kind of art you can decide to do. And they're all like, oh my gosh, yes, like I see it. I see the alignment, and like no discouragement. I'm always open to constructive criticism. So I'm not saying they should be like blowing smoke up your what, but like it's always important to really have those people in your corner, because you're going to doubt yourself and you're going to be like, what am I doing?
I'll also say, just to your question, yes, absolutely. Having a spouse, having someone who can help you share the bills, that sort of thing, it's extremely helpful. Yeah. But also, for me, I think there's also, yes, use your community, but the thing about pivoting is that, well, you're a grown-up. Right? You're not a 20-something starting from nothing or starting from just out of school. You have been doing something, and you can use that. Like, I worked in magazines, so I was already in media. Before I left my job, before when I was just starting out, I went to the photo editors at the magazines and asked, not to shoot for them, but like, how do you find photographers? What do people use for portfolios? Like, can you take a look at like this set of photos that I put together and give me feedback on that? Like, that's also community, but it's like, it's what I had on hand, like in the job I was already in. Yeah. So before like jumping ship, like, use the skills and the resources that are available. I understood how magazines worked and how media worked, so I wasn't going in blind.
So is it done? Okay, one more.
Okay. So the one word that I think is important that I haven't heard yet is serendipity, or just dumb luck. I'm 50 years into a career in geology, but I've been in a company, I've been in different academic positions, and the most interesting opportunities, the most interesting changes that I've made were because something kind of fell in my lap, and I was at least bold enough to say, there's something interesting here that I can do. It's a change. It wasn't what I was doing before.
Yeah.
But you have to be prepared to recognize that it is an opportunity, and you have to be willing to say, I'm prepared to take that risk to make that change.
100%.
So, if you've got blinders on, you think this is what you're going to do, then you miss those opportunities that you hadn't even thought of before.
That's a great point. Do y'all want to add to that, or he summed it up?
I'm not sure there was a question there, and I think we're out of time. But
yeah.
So,
but it's true.
You have
Oh yes. Go ahead. Oh.
no, behind.
Behind you.
Yeah, I'm
She
sorry.
had her hand up.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask from a perspective, because it seems like you all had kind of a well-established career or something that you were doing that was at least respectable before. It was something that you had to build off of and pivot from. And I'm wondering, what kind of advice would you have for someone who, I personally haven't built anything resembling a respectable career in anything. So what kind of advice would you have for someone who maybe has just drifted from one thing to another, someone who has done a lot of physical labor but hasn't really had a chance to do a lot of intellectual stuff or build a career in something like finance or IT where that does have weight? How would you go about showcasing that you are smart and that you are capable of entering something, even if the kind of work that you've been doing has been dictated by necessity and kind of blue collar in nature?
Yeah.
So
Well, maybe, do you mind answering, coming up and speaking to them? Because I already know what they're going to say, but listen, you don't worry about it. You are smart. I can tell that was a very smart question. Don't worry about it. You'll be good. They're going to give you such great advice. So, yes. Okay, and then you, sir, if you want to just come up and ask. Okay, cool. Thank you so much, everybody.